All right, well, I'll give a quick intro. Hi, everyone. For those of you that don't know me, my name's Vivian. I'm one of the festival directors for IFF Film Festival, and this week is our festival week. Yay! Yay! We've been working really hard all year to put this together. 11 teams, over 150 students from Brown and RISD. It's a really special effort, and we have tons of more events. We have a conversation with Lisa Ann Walter from Abbott Elementary today at 5 p.m. And then I'm moderating a talkback after the You Resemble Me screening, and that's going to be 7. Screenings at 7, and the talkback starts at 8:30 with the director, the executive producer, and the producer of the film. Please come through to all these events. They're free and open to the public. But today, we're really excited to have Debi Wisch here, and we have our lovely speakers and screeners team member, Coco, moderating. Take it away, Coco.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here with you today.
I'm thrilled to be here. Thanks for having me.
I know everyone wants to hear more from Debi than from me, so we can jump right in. So I know you've spent many years in marketing and as an art collector, but recently you've kind of taken this new step into documentary making and have done so with already so much success. So you're behind the scenes doing the stuff that sometimes goes unseen. Being a producer involves finding the architecture of a film and then finding all of the blueprint and then sourcing all the materials. It's both a creative and business-oriented role. Kathleen Kennedy, who's one of the biggest producers of the Star Wars franchise series, describes herself as a stickler for point of view when going into making a new film. What is your secret sauce to being a producer? Start out with an easy one.
I think for me, it's tenacity. I will not give up. And I had a 25-year career in marketing, which kind of prepares you for everything, because I was working on multiple brands, and I was creative director, and I was working with photographers, and I was coming up with slogans and kind of copy that would sell things. And I was in my mid-40s, and I decided not so much that I wanted to become a filmmaker, but that I wanted to make a film about the art world that wasn't like a heist film or a biopic or like whodunit. I wanted to do something that captured an ecosystem. And it was a crazy undertaking. It's much easier to make a film about like a dead athlete or musician where there's like a prescribed beginning, middle, and end, and then you can play with structure. But when you're making kind of an ecosystem film, like if someone said, let's make a film on a college film festival, it's hard because like where do you dive in? What do you do? So I didn't know any of that when I started. The only thing I knew is that if I said I was going to do something, I was going to get it done come hell or high water. So I think it's tenacity. And, you know, I was lucky because as an ingenue in my mid to late 40s making a film, I actually had a lot of the actual skills you needed as a documentary filmmaker, but I wasn't fully aware of it when I started.
It's so interesting that all these kind of, as we were talking about earlier, the different life paths that you had been on led you to collect all the skills you needed.
Yeah, and I think there was sort of a serendipity to it. Like I knew how to write. I knew how to shoot and style things. I knew how to do budgets. I've always worked at the intersection of sort of creativity and commerce. Mm-hmm. Like you're making something, but you have to figure out how to sell that something. Otherwise, what are you making it for? And I think as a filmmaker, especially a documentary filmmaker, where it's really, really, like someone said to me recently, you can make a killing, but you can't make a living. So, it's very feast or famine, and oftentimes you're making projects that are passion projects of the highest order, and maybe they'll break through, but you kind of have to be prepared for them not to.
And you've already touched on some of the things you do as a producer, but what do you expect to put into a project when you kind of either sign up or sign on to one?
I think if you're a good producer, it's like being a great parent. You have to do everything, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and you have to be on call 24/7. I'm a creative producer. Like, they're producers who'll come into a film and they're kind of taking someone's idea and shaping it. Mm-hmm. Like, Steven Spielberg may have an idea, or Jordan Peele may have an idea, and they'd give it to someone to produce. And the producer would go hire, cinematographer and editor and crew people and a line producer and showrunners and, makeup people and sound people and musicians. I tend to conceive of the projects and sort of put together teams organically. And you have to take care of everyone. You have to take care of the subjects of the film. You have to get proper releases from everyone you're shooting with and all the, backdrops and institutions you're at. You have to make sure everyone gets along. And if they don't get along, at least they respect each other. You have to get rid of people who are hugely disruptive in an unconstructive way. Like, what do they say? Hire slow, fire fast. That I've learned the hard way. You have to do everything. And then when the film is done, someone said to me recently, well, then you're done. I said, no. When the film is done, it's like you've given birth. Then you've got to raise the baby. Like this film that you screened the other day, we premiered at the Hamptons Film Festival in October 21. Mm-hmm. And then I did more than 20 festivals around the country for over a year. And I probably did 20 screenings at museums. And the director did just as much as I did. Then we got it on airlines. And you're like, I'm going to the Marfa Film Festival in a couple weeks. I'm screening at the Nasher.
Still with the art of making it.
Yeah. And you're still talking about it's good because the film is what you call evergreen. And you want to make projects like that. Also, I never thought about is you put 2 or 3 years of your life into a project. You want that project to live beyond the moment. You don't want it to be like, tomorrow's Ranger game where like they're on to the next one. You want it to live and breathe and kind of
have a life.
Yeah.
So because you're putting out these documentaries and then that are based on real stories and then going on for years and years in the future talking about them, this kind of evergreen effect, how does the way you talk about the subject and about the subject matter change with time?
That's an interesting question. You're asking, I think, do you approach the topic differently, hoping that it will last versus like a talk show?
Like, how do you talk about it differently 6 months after it's come out and the artists are kind of in a more similar place that what you've captured them as on screen than 2 years later when they've kind of had this new explosion?
So I'm working on a project right now about Confederate monuments, which we can talk about later because it's very sort of incendiary and spicy. But I on the train today, I was thinking about how the idea that you have to look forward, you have to look back before you can move forward. And I think that in my films, we've always made an effort. And I've made 2 films from the ground up, and I'm now in production on 3 films. I'm very in it. Is if you have historical context in the film and archival, it sort of roots it. Mm-hmm. It's like the deeper the foundation, the higher the building. And I think that things like that, and again, I didn't know this at the time. When we made The Price of Everything, which was like a very big success in 2018 and took over 2 years to make. Remember, we were focused on archival and you wanted to show the moment when art and commerce got into bed together, and we made this huge effort to get the Rauschenberg footage. And it was really smart because it grounds something in history, and I think it takes it further versus like a film that's sort of a moment. Okay. So I think when you're making films, again, it's different. If you're making a biopic or a story about one specific event, you can probably do things a little more quickly. Whereas when you're making something that's more of an ecosystem film, there's a lot of ways. There's no right way to carve the turkey. You just want to make sure you carve the turkey. And I think that you can enter and exit in different ways, but there's maybe secrets that will make it last longer. And one of them, like, I think, cinematography really matters, and music really matters, and sort of how you shoot the film matters. And I'm the kind of filmmaker where I want it story-based, but I want it I want there to be a reason that it was a movie. Like, why wasn't it a news show or an article? So you have to make it beautiful and like a work of art in itself. And then I think you have to kind of populate it with factoids about history so that in a year or two, that history doesn't, like 20 years ago doesn't matter. If you say something was 20 or 22 years ago, it doesn't make an iota of a difference. If you say it was a month ago or a week ago, that seems like a huge amount of time. Mm-hmm. So I think you want to
ground it.
Yeah, and you can do little tricks to make something last longer.
So interesting. And you had already mentioned your 25 years in marketing and branding, so obviously packaging is an expertise of yours. How do you go about packaging a film?
I love doing that. I don't think most producers do. I think a lot of them hire out. Like I'm literally working on the postering, or what you call the one-pager for this film I'm doing. And me and my 2 interns are going to end up doing the poster. Both my films I did the poster for, and I saw the image and I knew that was the right image. And I think you look at something. One of the things I was thinking of when we did the poster for The Art of Making It was, if you're on your iPhone, because I watch kids, anyone under 40 is a kid, so don't take offense. I watch people going like this, and like, what would grab you? And then I had this vision of, I'm on an airplane and I fly all the time and I often watch movies on a plane. What would make my poster stick out? All of them are black and red and white and gray. And I was like, yellow. So, sort of thinking of simple tricks, but usually there's an image. And when you watch what's called an assemblage of the film, like usually when you structure a documentary, you're not scripted. So you structure the film and you have what's called an assemblage, which is like you have all the ingredients in there, but you have to cut it down. Usually an assemblage is could be 4 or 5 hours, and you want to keep a documentary. Yeah. Most feature films you want to keep at 90 minutes or even a little less. So you watch that 4-hour thing and you know what are the 5 or 6 good scenes. You just know it. Like, I could show it to a focus group, you guys being my focus group, and there'd be a consensus. We might not agree on the number 1, 2, and 3, but we're going to agree on 10. So those have to be in there. And you're going to look and you're going to see probably 10 images that could be the poster. I'll know, I know that's one of the things I know which one kind of works. But you'll all kind of agree generally, if that makes sense. Yeah. It's almost like when you listen to music. Like, you may not all have the same favorite band, but you're kind of going to agree that, like, Chance is really talented.
Exactly. Certain things are not up for debate.
Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
So when you're thinking about packaging a film, do you think about the intended audience first, or are you more focused on the product and documentary itself that you're putting out there?
So you get to the heart of the issue for any arts, which is art versus commerce. I like to think of the integrity of the project first and foremost, but I think you're a really, really bad producer if you're not thinking about who's going to consume that product. So I think you have to think about both.
You have to balance it.
Yeah. I would err, this is completely subjective. I'm an independent filmmaker, and I'm really proud to be in the indie space. And I spend a lot of time, I'm very involved in the New York Film Festival, and you need both. Like, you need to feed each other. It's almost like, the artist versus the museum versus the gallery, and like they can be seemingly at war, but you're all occupying the same ecosystem, and you kind of need to be nice to each other.
Work together.
So if you're making a film, and this is something that's happening a lot in the industry right now, which is sort of like the Netflix of it all, it's becoming very formulaic. When we were talking to some of the big players, the streamers, about The Art of Making It, one of the comments was, at 40 minutes, it's like you need a death. You need a big moment. And that's not how art is made. Like, I don't think Quentin Tarantino was thinking about, like, what am I doing at 40 minutes? Yeah. He was thinking about creating creating a visual masterpiece that was, like, timeless and fabulous, or Scorsese, or, any of these major kind of dreamer filmmakers who kind of moved the needle and shifted the paradigm. You can't be thinking of like at 5 minutes you have to get them on the roller coaster, and at 20 minutes someone needs to be shot, and then you need to wrap it all up with a bow. It's just kind of stupid. So, but that being said, you know that if a film is longer than 90 minutes, it's not going to do well. You know that if you're making a film about the art world, you better include some famous artists. If you're making a film about the sports world, you better throw in, some famous athlete. Like,
so you try and keep the integrity of the film by peppering the things will make it successful to kind of give it the most.
I mean, I hate saying that, but I think you kind of have to do that.
Yeah.
I think you have to stack the deck in your favor. It's really, really, really hard to make a film. It's really hard to release a film. It's hard to monetize these things. And yeah, I think you do that as much as you can without compromising the integrity of the project.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And usually what happens in film, you have something called final cut. And final cut is like, the golden key, the golden ticket. Who gets to decide what actually ends up? Like if there's a dispute about how the film should end or the music or something, who gets the final call? Mm-hmm. And when you have a well-known director, or they might get it, and sometimes it's the producer. And I think that in the end, that's the decision where art or commerce comes first, because a producer usually is going to err on the side of commerce, and like a director or a writer or a artist is going to err on the side of the artistry.
Sometimes do you have to take the side of commerce just to kind of introduce that point of view if you're in a room with...
I've never done that.
Okay.
I mean, but I've never dealt with someone where I thought that they were doing something that would, kill the project, like that it was so out there and inappropriate. I also think it's really important as a producer to empower the creative talent. Like I sort of straddle both worlds, but if you want to get great directors or musicians or actors or editors to work with you, you have to give them some free rein. I had worked with an editor on The Art of Making It named Nineveh Minier, who's really, really, really talented. And she's like a sculptor. You give her the footage and she goes into a cave or a studio and she kind of molds it into something. And she had done a project right before for one of the big streamers, and she's like, I'm going back to the indie world. They gave me 8 months and they told me I had to do X, Y, and Z and blah, blah, blah. But I just don't work that way.
Yeah, you trust the people that you hire to do what they need to do.
Yeah, but that being said, this is a younger audience. I think early on in your career, you should do whatever the hell they tell you to do and just use it as an opportunity to kind of hone your skills and learn a lot and decide what you will and won't do when you have options. Like, I mean, I'd be really annoyed if I had someone come in.
Our age, an intern being like, I think I know the right cut for this.
But I actually don't mind that. I have a lot of interns and younger people who do that, and I always really appreciate it as long as it's thoughtful and constructive. But I think you also shouldn't work for people who don't want to hear your voice.
Mm-hmm. And you began film producing with Love, Cecil, which is a documentary that explores Cecil Beaton, who's a really famous photographer's kind of unique and totally individual visual aesthetics. And it's based off of archival footage and personal interviews and anecdotes by people he's worked with. So it kind of functions, correct me if I'm wrong, in your credits as a producerial test run.
That project, I didn't have a test run. I tend to run in the fire, just kind of like I'll figure it out. I was in production on The Price of Everything, which was all consuming, and it was a huge project. And we had hired an Academy Award nominated director, Nathaniel Kahn, because we had been interviewing all these people. And I thought he was amazing and it was going to take longer, and we did it. And in the middle of it, Lisa Vreeland, who had also done a film on Diane Vreeland and a great film on Peggy Guggenheim called Art Addict, she had come to me and asked if I wanted to be involved in that film. So I learned a lot, but I wouldn't say that, like, produced-ish. I produce The Price of Everything and The Art of Making It and the projects I'm working on now. That was kind of like learning and
So it wasn't something that you felt you had the same level of ownership over?
Or control, no.
And do you enjoy that, or do you more enjoy having full control over?
I don't want full control. I want collaborators. I want really, really smart collaborators, and we work together and we kind of feed and nurture each other. And it's really hard to make films. It's a long process, and you're getting in bed with a group of people for a long time. Yeah. And I've learned, I've made mistakes along the way, and it really, really, really matters to hire slow or build the team. Like, gather your army. You're going to need people around the country to help you. You're going to need people in high places and not so high places, and you have to be cognizant of it every step of the way. And I think also, it's probably like building a sports team or any company. Like, you're putting together this team, and you want everyone calling each other and texting each other and meeting with each other like 24/7 for a year or two. So,
and how do you go about putting together a team? Do you kind of begin at the top with the director and then build down, or just whoever you find a place for them in the film?
I don't think there's any right way to do it. Sometimes it's how the idea comes to you. So for The Art of Making It, the director was a young woman named Kelsey Edwards, and she had done some curatorial projects, and she had taught. She had gone to film school at Stanford. She's in her early 40s, and she was thinking of making a film about this student art fair.
Okay.
And I was thinking of making a film about emerging artists. And we got together, we were introduced, and we sort of, like, it emanated from that. And I brought in some people, and she brought in some people. On the project I'm working with on now, about the Confederate monuments, I had been in development with a small team of people I really, really liked and trusted, because I was obsessed with, I'm Canadian, and when the Confederate monuments started coming down after George Floyd's murder, I was just fascinated by, like, wait a minute, how did these come to be? This is America. It's supposed to be a democracy. Like, what's going on here? And the further I got down that rabbit hole, the more I was obsessed with it. And then I'm listening to some podcast with Alan Schwartzman called Hope and Dread on June 22nd, 2022. And this curator, who I've always been obsessed with, named Hamza Walker's talking about a show he's going to do at the Museum of Contemporary Art in Los Angeles called Monuments. And he's going to bring Confederate monuments and have them in dialogue or juxtaposed with contemporary works of art.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, oh my God, that's it. That's my entry point. I know the art world. I know MoCA. These people will trust me. And I was trying to figure out, like, how do I do a film about the Confederate monuments without getting overly, like, stuck in the politics. I want it to be about, like, the question of what do we do with pieces of our history that we don't want to deal with? Like, how do you move forward without looking back? So I'm ready to interview him and go to LA. And I find out that there's this whole other film in production on the exact same topic. And the director, one of the producers called me, and she said, you don't know me, but we've met each other, and you sound cool, and I'm cool, and I'm doing this, and I heard you want to do this, and maybe we want to join forces. And I was like, oh my God, no. Anyways, I ended up meeting them, and we had, like, a number of meetings, and now we're just plowing forward together.
So you joined forces.
Yes. And we both brought some members of our team, and it's been phenomenal so far, which is wonderful. But I think that's also atypical. I don't think there's one way that these things happen. I think that they're just, I'm working on a World War II project that I was brought into by the director who knew me, and then I'm working on a short film that I had seen, a family film, and I just thought it was amazing, and I was like, I want to. So
just being pushed by passion forward.
Yeah, but I think most producers, especially after a certain point, some projects they're generating, some other are. You don't want to be the lead on every producer, and you're gonna, like, be pulling out your hair. And also because producers have so many skills, on some projects you might be responsible for raising money. On others you might be responsible for keeping the team happy and making sure the access is okay and the distribution is in place. Like,
So you're sort of molding your job into what that film needs it to be.
yeah, and it's going to shift. Like there are things within the film industry that are very siloed. The producer is
one.
visiting every single silo every day.
So the first big film which you've mentioned, The Price of Everything, was an Emmy-nominated documentary that you produced, which examines how art and consumerism have sort of come together to create this multi-billion-dollar industry. And it similarly relies on interviews and personal anecdotes to drive the story forward, however adds this different business and money-driven storyline. And then the art of making it ties together the two ideas, which presents the audience with the money-driven art world as well as these individual artists. And we really get to hear their personal stories and get invested in them as people. What are the through lines you found in making these films?
So, with The Price of Everything, the through line, I mean, if anything, both films are kind of criticized for being ecosystems films without one narrative thread. But I think that it's the strength of both of the films, and they're more complicated to make films like that. Like, it would be easier. I remember when we were making The Price of Everything, we were like, let's just find 5 pieces that sold well at auction or didn't, and trace them backwards and use that as kind of a narrative device. We created the structure in the edit room on that film, but the real theme of that film or through line is the relationship between art and money, which is very complicated because there's a great line in that film where Larry Poons, who is an artist who kind of had a moment in the 60s and then kind of fell off the cliff and then got rediscovered, partly because of the film, he says, you know, as the greatest artist, the artist that makes the most money. And he said, how can that be? Your batting average is your batting average, but like you can be the greatest artist in the world and no one knows who you are. And by the way, who of us has been anointed to determine what's great?
Yeah.
Like we can agree that certain things are bad, and we can agree that certain things are great, but like the greatest ever, like there's no running time. And all of that might not be determined for like Michelangelo or Da Vinci or Rembrandt. You know, they're considered great because over the passage of time, you see their influence and their staying power and, you know, the fact that they capture universal themes. So that was kind of what the film was really about when art and commerce got into bed together. Okay. And the relationship between art and money. And then when you make a film, there's like 100 hours of footage, and then you use about 90 of them, 90 minutes, and the rest is on the cutting floor. And when you're like, the first job a lot of students will get when they work on a film is to kind of pull the selects. And pulling the selects means you kind of get rid of all the footage that's, without question, junk, right? And, wait, where was I going with this? My train of thought got derailed. We're talking about
the through line between the art of
making
okay,
so yes. So when I made the art of making it, one of the things that ended up on the cutting floor was all of the younger artists and the art students. And it's where my heart lies in the art world. It's sort of like getting young people to pursue creative careers, because I always worry like what will happen to our world if all the smart people become investment bankers. It's not so good.
I worry about that too.
No, I mean, it's good to be an investment banker, but you don't want everyone. Like you need people to pursue dreamy things and to be creative. Or, as Jerry Saltz would say, art is the best delivery system, the most advanced delivery system in the world. And if we all sort of shy away from creative ventures because they're hard, what's going to happen? So I wanted to make a film specifically about emerging artists and young talent. And also the question of why would anyone, especially with a degree from an Ivy League school, pursue a career where the chances of making it, which I would define as just being able to support yourself in your craft, are less than 5%. Like, why would
Yeah.
anyone pursue that? Where
All the odds are stacked against you.
every single one of them. So that was sort of the premise for that film. And I wouldn't say that the through line was the same, but one directly led to the other.
They work well in conversation
Yeah,
with each
I'd say like one's about art and commerce, and one's about sort of the decisions that you're faced to make, the choices that you have to make, and the things that you have to give up in order to pursue a career in a nonlinear path. And it could be art, it could be dance, it could be film, any music, any creative venture is a crapshoot.
And because you work so much with interviews, how do you make your interviewees feel comfortable enough to open up on camera when they know that their faces are going to be at 20 different festivals and so on and so forth?
I mean, that is the job of the director.
Okay.
I can tell who's going to be good on camera,
Okay.
but I can't tell. There's a line like who's going to spread their legs for the camera. You want people to say things and do things that they've never done before. That's what, the famous David Frost interview with Nixon. Like, that's what you're aiming for. Also, I don't love in the film, I try and stay away from talking heads, which is just like the interviews, and try and get people to actually do something. So you're sort of showing, like getting into an artist studio or going to an auction house or being at an art fair, like getting into that world and taking advantage of the access you have.
And in those moments, are you with the director in the artist studio saying, like, I think that's going to be a good moment right there?
Sometimes, yeah. Sometimes you should be there. And also because the two films have been about the art world, and I know a lot about the art world. Sometimes I'm there whispering in their ear. But I mean, ultimately, most producers, like, you might be on a shoot, but you kind of want to let the director go direct the shoot. For the film I'm working on now, there's 4 producers, and I guess we're all pretty seasoned, and we like being on shoots. So we were like, okay, we'll each just be on a
set day.
Yeah, and it kind of also, I mean, there's a lot of smart reasons why to have a producer on the shoot. First of all, it saves money, and it probably saves time. You're running around getting snacks and making sure everyone's happy, and you're taking a PH job, but you're also hearing what's going on, and you can start spotting like connectives between the footage. And you can watch after a shoot. You might do a full day shoot. You might have 5 hours of footage, and there might be 5 minutes of usable footage if you're lucky. And you kind of know it when you see it, so you don't have to sit and watch through all the stuff where they're talking about their dog or their lunch. So I think it's smart to be there, but it's also smart to kind of like disappear. Yeah. It's like a good parent. Like, you don't want to be hands-on all the time. You kind of step back and
be there when you're needed.
Yeah.
So in one of your Q&As for the Art of Making It at the Doc Fest in New York, you began your speech by listing off a huge list of collaborators that you worked with in order to make this film happen. Have you always preferred working with big groups of creatives than working alone?
Thank you for mentioning that, because that was a big thing, and it's sort of like something that got under my skin. Is I became very close with the editors on that project and also the musicians, and they all said that when they're at festivals they don't even get called on stage often. So it was sort of, I just think that there are a lot of people who spend so much time pouring their talent and energies into these projects, and it shouldn't be just about the director or the producer or the financier. It's, the
group.
Yeah, and the sum is greater than the parts. So that was kind of my shout out to creative talent. I also think that most people don't even know what an editor does, or what a line producer does, or what a producer does, or what a story editor and archival editor. So I think just kind of shining a light on them opens more opportunities for others.
What do you look for in the people that you collaborate with?
The ability to collaborate. I like people who are smart and kind and honest, And also, like, they're not like, what do you call it? Like glory hogs, like people who need the light always on them. I don't think that kind of environment fosters the best result. I think, and also people who are really, we're living in a time where civil discourse and just the ability to be like the far right and the far left, I always joke they're holding hands in the back, but like, you need to banter when you're doing something creative, whether you're hanging an art show or putting together a record album or making a movie or figuring out the distribution for channels for a film. You've got to know, you've got to listen to other points of view. Yesterday, I had a watch down for this short film I did, this 30-minute film. And we had this kind of cross-section of people, mostly people I had brought in. There were 12 different people. And everyone had such different points of view, and you sort of sit there for 3 hours, and at the end there was a consensus, and it was way better than what we started with. And I just think, like, you kind of want that. You want people who have the ability, and it's not common in sort of the creative world to say, you know what, you're right, and then just like have a tequila and move on. So,
and as students, as we kind of think about building our own creative communities, how would you suggest that we go about it? Do you ever start by kind of writing down what you think your strengths and weaknesses are and then hoping people fill in the gaps? Or are you kind of like, who do I get along with? Who do I want to spend time with? Or is it a mixture of the two?
I'm more the latter. Okay. And Ann Pasternak, who's the director of the Brooklyn Art Museum, I once said to her, you have such a good board. How do you build your board? And she said, I just kind of think of it like, how do I create the best dinner party in the world? And now that I'm kind of a couple films in and I have more confidence in my ability to make good decisions and also my ability to correct bad decisions quickly, I'm kind of going to at it more from that point of view. And I also think that when you're running, it's not that different than running a business. Because if you're running a business, there's certain things that you can delegate or that they can be filled by anyone. Like I have a really good accountant for the film. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of really good accountants, and I don't have to deal with the accountant every day. And I had a really bad accountant before who used to call me 4 times a week because they wanted to just talk about the film. And I'm like, I really don't have time to talk to you. Goodbye. But I couldn't do that because I didn't know how to just whatever. So you kind of, like those kind of things, it just matters that they're really competent. Like I have a great lawyer, and I went through lots of fancy entertainment lawyers and ended up with this lawyer I found in New Jersey who's super scrappy, really smart, really honest. But I don't have to deal with him all the time because he does a good job. The people I have to deal with every day, I really want to just love them.
So nice. And when you Google films on art, the art of making, it comes up as number 5.
Oh, really?
Yes.
What's number 1?
I don't have that written down, but I can tell you what 4 and 6 are.
What are 4 and 6?
Big Eyes and At Eternity's Gate.
No, Big Eyes I know. Big Eyes is the Keane film.
I think At Eternity's Gate is about Van Gogh.
Okay. I bet the Banksy one is like 1 or 2.
Yeah, I think.
Okay. We'll get there. It takes a while.
Come back next year for updates on where the art of making it is on Google.
Exactly.
So since this film was created during COVID, you said that in an interview it was a product of a moral reckoning in the world. Why do you think this film has captured your audience's attention so acutely?
I just think that during the pandemic, so when we were making that film, and I don't know if you've all watched the film, but we were about 80% done with primary shooting. And usually what you do is you film like 80-90%, and then you start editing and you save some shoots and you go do the filler shoots. And it might require going back to Jenna Gribben and saying, when you were talking about going to that museum in Lexington, Kentucky, can we get into more detail? Because you're looking for very specific things. Like the editor might come back and they say, we need someone to cry, we need someone to use blue paint, or whatever it is. So you save those. So we got so lucky, but we had this 2 weeks where we were shooting in LA, and our very last shoot was with Charles Gaines, who, if any of you are in New York, you must go see his Creative Time project called Moving Chains on Roosevelt Island, which is extraordinary. But he's probably the most important living Black male artist, and he taught at CalArts for 50 years. And he's in his 70s. I don't know why he let us film him on March 12th, 2020, literally the day before. Like, we were all buying toilet paper and sanitizer, and he let us film him. And it was really, we couldn't have made the film without that shoot, because he gave us the gravitas and the star power. Like, he was sort of, you know, the one who's the pearls that come out of his mouth when you're filming him, and we just needed him for 1,000 reasons. So March 13th, we fly back. No, we were supposed to shoot David Kordansky, who canceled because of COVID. And I thought, oh, we'll just stay in LA and I'll shoot next week. And like by Sunday, the world had forever changed. And we didn't have everything we needed. And I was like, oh my God, I've got all these people who've like blocked off 8 months to edit the film and score the film. And then one of the funders backed out, and I'm like, what am I going to do? I've got all this footage. And we decided that we'd wait 2 weeks and we'd all kind of like look inside and have a come to Jesus. Like Kelsey, the director, had to deal with her kids, and the editor was a little freaked out because she thought we'd cancel the project. And meanwhile, like, we have all these people who we filmed, and a lot of people, like a lot of, you know, assistant editors, like people depending on this film for their livelihood. And at the end of those 2 weeks, like, I don't know if you guys remember what was going on in the world, but it was chaotic, and no one knew if we were going to be, you know, closed for a week or closed for a year or closed for 5 years. No one was going to movie theaters or film festivals in the near future. And at a certain point, I just felt like, you know, we're going to have a lot of time to sort of sit and think about what matters in life and in society. And, you know, we had Trump in office, and there was like a lot of insanity going around. And what we ended up doing is I decided to plow forward. It gave us all a lot of time to focus on structuring and creating and scoring the film. We all spent way more time on it than we would have had it in normal times. We kind of got it done in record time. And I sent the cinematographer, and it was his first feature project. And also, like, he would have been on welfare. Like, you had all these people lined up. But I sent him to a course in Boston where he learned how to shoot in COVID. And there were a couple other films in production.
What was that course like?
He just went. I sent him for 2 weeks, and he learned about the hygiene and the distance and the camera lenses and all this.
I had no idea that even existed.
I don't think it existed until then. I don't think there was probably like something you did when you went and shot in, you know, certain villages somewhere or in hospitals somewhere where you had to be like in a bubble or something. And we just shot around it. And we only did one shoot with masks. And when I saw it in the rough cut, I'm like, oh, we shouldn't have made her wear the mask. Like, it sort of worked.
Yeah.
And I think it made the film kind of heavier, like kind of more relevant. We also had the biggest artistic decision in the film was whether to include COVID or not. Because originally there was no COVID. This was a film about emerging artists and sort of why anyone would pursue a career in the arts. And then you have all these monuments coming down, and, you know, protests taking place at museums, and, you know, the Black Lives Matter movement and Me Too and Trump, and it all happened during COVID. So you had to sort of capture it in the film. And I know a lot of people said to me, well, did you feel uncomfortable kind of merging art and politics? I'm like, art and politics have always been merged.
Yeah.
Like, art's always been political. So
interesting.
I don't know if I answered that question, but okay.
Not to cut you off. We do have about 10 minutes left. I don't know if we want to do a little audience.
Can I do one more question then Q&A?
Okay.
In one of your talks for The Art of Making It, you describe it as a love letter to artists and also a cautionary tale of what can happen when we're not careful when choosing the DNA of our heroes. So I just wanted to ask about some of your personal heroes, either in your career or in life, and who are some of the producers and filmmakers you look up to?
Wow. No one's ever asked me that. It is a love letter to artists, though, because I hope when people see the film, they're still kind of hungry to go into the fire and create and, try to expose themselves and put themselves out there and make something happen. I guess my dad's kind of my hero, my person hero, just because I love his optimism, and he tells me such funny, smart things that I always remember, including you got to get up to bat, and he always say, one of his great sayings is, when you jump too high, they can see your asshole. It's such a good one because it's about modesty and it's about sharing the attention with the team. But he said to me the other day, it's too bad Joe Biden's 2 sandwiches short of a picnic. I was like, that's kind of true. It is true. Anyways, and I think my professional heroes are people who are fearless. Gloria Steinem, Marilyn Minter, Quentin Tarantino. I'm working with a filmmaker right now, Amy Hobby, who I adore, and they're just fearless. They're not afraid of, as long as you're kind and honest, insulting people. You're always going to have people mad and upset. I'm working a little bit on this film with Liz Plank, where we've had 9 lawsuits already, and just to kind of, but I don't care. I would have cared 20 years ago. We're right. We did nothing wrong.
Yeah.
What do I care? I think, and people who just fearless and who kind of stand up for what they believe in. They're willing to listen to other sides. I think creatively, I was with Marilyn Minter the other day, and I was like, she's just an extraordinary woman who's been true to herself and kind of unfailingly so. And there's a reason why she's adored by people, sort of all generations.
Yeah. Love that. Darren Aronofsky I always think of this quote. He's like, I don't care if people are screaming because they're angry and hate my film or cheering at the end, as long as they have some sort of reaction. I'm okay with it.
Yeah, I mean, when we did The Price of Everything, I'll never forget this. We premiered at Sundance, which was a huge deal, and we got a really good time. It matters when you... And I remember one of my producing partners was so upset because we got a bad review. And I was like, why do you care? It doesn't matter. Let them go make a film. Everyone's always going to have something bad to say and good to say, but... Yeah, it would, and also the thing that would be devastating is if people didn't see it and have a response. You're right.
Okay, I think now we can open it up for some Q&A if anyone has any questions.
I can ask a question.
Okay.
So you mentioned that you're making a film on Confederate statues, and I don't know how far into production you are on that, but you said earlier, making a film is really hard, which I imagine means it's particularly hard for marginalized communities and marginalized stories to have that story told in the form of a documentary film. So I'm wondering how in the production of that film are you taking the time and investing the energy to elevate those voices, particularly in the context of the marginalized American Black community?
Well, that film, that's a very good question. I mean, I think that on The Art of Making It, we made a huge effort to kind of focus broadly. And I think I've always done that, but it was much more intentional on that film. On it's called Bury Me Standing, the working title. I mean, the star of the film, there's an actual star of the film, is this brilliant kind of provocateur, renegade curator, street poet. And he's amazing. And he grew up, in a poor community in Chicago, and the team is incredibly diverse, and not just when you look at us, but the backgrounds and the educations and where we're it couldn't be more so. And I think that if you have, there was a moment where everyone was like, oh, we have to diversify, we have to do this, we have to do that. It's the right thing to do. It's the right thing to do, but it's also a smart thing to do. You want those voices in the room. It broadens your audience and it broadens your perspective. And I think you're an idiot not to do that. And if maybe 10 years ago, people could say, I didn't really realize. Now, if you didn't realize, you're, not opening a newspaper. So, I mean, that the film's about that. It's about the need to have conversations. It's sort of through the prism of the Confederate monuments and the questions of, like, what do you do with them? What's the right decision? And no one really knows. Like, I don't, there's no right answer. So it's about discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
Hi. How or where did you start out, and what are some things that you think helped you grow to where you are today?
How did I start out in film or in like?
In film.
Well, I had been working in branding and marketing, and then I kind of took a pause. Like when I had 3 younger kids, I wasn't working full time. I was kind of like working around them. I dove into film to make a film about the art world. And everything I had done till then, I think I was really lucky that it helped me kind of, I didn't even know that I had the skill set necessary to become a successful filmmaker. I just figured I'd push and will it to fruition. So I'm an accidental film producer. It was not a deliberate career plan. I knew I wanted to, I always worked in a creative field, and I was never going to go into the corporate world. I deal with the corporate world, but I didn't want to work in, an office in Times Square and reporting to people. I was kind of more like I want to do my own thing and make creative projects. Yes.
So what was it like for the art of making it to be working with all these different art critics and these emerging artists? And also, was there a specific motivation or pivotal moment that made you want to create this film about the art world and how it works and all of that?
I just thought it was so I'd been involved. I'm involved as an arts education, and I'd been collecting art. My mother's an architect. I kind of grew up in that world. I was just fascinated by it because it was so, there's no transparency. And I'm kind of other than the drug world, there's less regulations. The second least regulated industry in the world is the drug world, and then the art world.
That's crazy.
It's crazy. And it grew from sort of a small community of a little tribe of collectors to this $60 to $90 billion a year industry. They don't even know how big it is. It's that opaque. And I was just fascinated by it. Just every aspect of it I found so interesting, and also kind of the vitriol within it. But working with the artists, the actual artists, is always just dreamy and wonderful. I think artists are great because they're fearless. They're, you're out there making something. You don't know if anyone's ever going to buy it, and you sort of don't care. But you have to make it. I think all artists have that. People always ask, what are the artists like and what do they share in common? And the only thing they share in common is they all say they can't do anything else. They just need to make their art.
I think, unfortunately, that's all we have time for, but I want to thank everyone so much for coming in the middle of your busy weeks, and most importantly, thank Debi for being here in person. It's such a treat. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Reminder that there is a 5 p.m. Talk with Abbott Elementary's Lisa Ann Walter in Granoff, and then the 7 p.m. screening and talk back of You Resemble Me. And please follow the Ivy Film Festival for more Festival Week updates. Thank you.
Thank you.